Okay, recording in progress. Hey, Stuart, a different shirt. Who helps you dress to get ready for your podcast?
Well, that would be me.
Oh, really?
I happened to see it when I was in town. I said, it's perfect for my podcast. So,
Oh, yeah.
in Kenya, I'm proud of my Kenyan home. I'm even building a house over here.
Oh, that's cool. How do you have time for the podcast then?
Hey, you make time for what's important to you.
Yeah? Okay. Do you have any tips for me for my wardrobe?
Well, you could lose the ugly T-shirt, but other than that, you're okay. Just kidding.
That's a matter of taste. That T-shirt is not ugly.
Oh, okay. All right. Sorry I blew up.
Stuart, I am so happy to be here because I'm going to be fascinated by all the things that you have to talk to me about today.
Okay, good. I'm glad to hear that. So we're trying a new role then.
Okay. I want to ask you a question, Stuart, because you've proven to be really good in the past about answering hard questions. Is God good or bad?
Oh, God is good. Everybody knows that. Why don't you ask me a hard one now?
That actually was a hard one. You didn't understand the question. Why? What's your proof that God is good?
Well, my personal experience with God is proof. And also, as I read through the Bible, Scott, I'm going to step on some toes here, okay?
Including mine, probably.
Yeah, maybe yours too. As I read through the Bible, I see that God has a lot of grace and mercy. He has, and Jesus, I'm reading a book called Think Like Jesus by Stephen Sisler. And let me tell you something, a lot of people who profess Christianity do not think like Jesus.
Okay.
So my concept of why God is good is because I believe God is in the redeeming, restoring, reconciling business. I think he knows how to do that.
You're confusing me, though, because I think most of the institution of Christianity believes that God will eternally torment miscreants, people who don't fall into line, and that'll be the majority of people. So I can't reconcile it in my mind. Help me reconcile that, Stuart.
Okay, so we talked about authority and responsibility last time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's, you believe that was, let me go back to my notes, implicitly or implied by the way God taught. Not necessarily explicitly, but it was authority and responsibility is implied by the teachings of God. Is that correct?
Would that be through the Bible or through creation? My contention is that it is taught through just the observation of creation, but maybe you're talking about the book itself, the text. I'm not sure.
Well, I think it's implied in the Bible.
It is also, yeah. Yeah, there's parallel support.
Now let me ask you a question. If God implies that for us, does he have to live by his own rule?
That is a good question. So, but I want to go back just a little bit because I'm not done grilling you. You're not quite off the witness stand yet. What is God's plan for man? In your view?
I teach that the two most important days of your life, number one, the day you're born. Number two, this is a Mark Twain. Number two, the day you figure out why you were born.
Okay.
So if we have a creator, I theorize that it's for a purpose. If it's for a purpose, then when we find our purpose, that brings God glory. Because if you build something, Scott, do you just build it because of for no reason?
Typically, no.
No. So God created. We have a creator, whatever you want to call him. We have a creator, unless you were hatched. I haven't checked your belly button, but so if you have a creator,
we could check it right now if you like.
No, let us not.
Okay, let's move on.
Let's just assume that you were created.
Okay, let's just go with that assumption for now.
Okay, but here's the problem. Let me tell you, I'm going to go back to my little illustration. A lot of people, if this is everything that's known about God, a lot of people have their little circle of understanding and they defend what they believe they know. I know of a guy who said, I have studied, I know what I believe, and it's not up for discussion. So what does that tell you? He's not going to learn from you and I.
No.
Because this circle represents, I would say that falls into the area of ego. I know what I know, and I know it's right, and I don't need to listen to anybody else. I'm not going to argue.
If God's purposes would be we are created in order to fulfill our ultimate purpose, did God fail? That's question number 3. Did God fail? Because according to some religions, namely Christianity, it's the worst offender. Well, maybe not. I can think of one other that might be a worse offender, but that the majority of people are going to miss the mark and only a tiny fraction will actually make it. So this is a practical, honest question. Did God fail in his purposes?
Okay, do you think there might be something out here in the realm of stuff that we don't know that would change how we think about God?
I've spent my life in that outer realm, in the wilderness, so to speak, beating the brush, as it were.
So when you talk about there's somebody that brought up a very, very insightful question about authority and responsibility, and that might be where you're heading.
That is where I'm heading. Yeah. I'm circling this thing before we actually go for the jugular.
Okay, no problem. You just go for the jugular. So what I'm saying, though, what I'm saying is if this is my circle of understanding about who God is, and I have ego, and I say what I know is right, or I don't want to get out of my comfort zone and look at something different, because a lot of people do not want to do that, then I'm not going to figure out that maybe the doctrine that has been taught to me in a certain way isn't exactly on course.
That's scary.
Well, why?
To leave our comfort zone is scary because we are programmed. We're very tribal. We're programmed. Our brain is actually optimized much more for seeking a tribe to belong to and to find comfort and security in that tribe instead of finding truth. Because somehow, for some reason in the life we find ourselves, to really become a truth seeker tends to force you to leave your comfort zone, the so-called hero's journey, which I've mentioned in another video. And we have to leave, in many cases, the comfort and security of the tribe. And that's scary. That's scary for all of us.
Yeah, it is.
But all paths lead to a question. If you're a serious truth seeker, it's like all paths lead to Rome. All paths lead to this question. What is God's character? What is God's divine nature? You mentioned that in another video.
I talk about God's divine nature all the time.
That should be on the whiteboard. It should be tattooed on our forehead, probably. What is God's divine nature? And that's where this question is going. So maybe, would this be a good time for you to read that question? Because that's a very insightful question.
Okay, let me read it to you. Question. This is about authority and responsibility. You argue that eternal conscious torment conflicts with natural law, particularly the principle that authority must be matched with responsibility. Could you clarify how eternal torment specifically violates this equilibrium? In other words, what authority is being exercised in eternal punishment that lacks a corresponding responsibility, and why does that imbalance render the doctrine incompatible with natural law?
Mm-hmm.
When I read that question, Scott, I said, now that's an intelligent person.
That's an intelligent question. Yeah, that person is asking a good question. I hate to just pick a point and say that the outcome of this discussion rotates on this axis, but It almost does. Is God internally self-consistent? In other words, does God practice what he preaches?
Well, that's what my question was to you.
Yeah. Does God practice what he preaches? Is God the Father that says, do what I say and not as I do?
Back to my whiteboard. A lot of people would say that God can do whatever he wants to do because he's God.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, he can do what he wants to do because that's what they believe. And listen, I read a book one time by Don Keathley. I don't remember the exact title. It was something about illusions of hell. And being naive, I put it on Facebook and thought it would generate some conversation, honest dialectic, like you like to say. Scott, people love the concept of hell. I don't know why, but I was trashed. Let me tell you, they accused me of having hidden sins and everything else.
You probably have a few, Stuart, but maybe not related to this question.
Wait.
Those are two separate topics. So let's deal with that one later.
Okay. We'll talk about that later. Yeah.
So, okay. How is responsibility, by taking responsibility, how does it negate the fact that people believe that God is going to eternally torment people who didn't make the mark? And not only that, the majority of them. So I have a question. I want to pose a question to whoever's unlucky enough to be watching this video. Suppose that you as a parent give in to your child because they want a dog and say, okay, I'll give you this dog, but you have to take care of it. In other words, you're gonna make the decisions about it, about how to take care of it, and you're responsible for whatever the dog does, or whatever happens to the dog. Both things. So let's suppose a little time later that you leave the home and the dog is in the home and the dog absolutely wrecks the home. He's a young puppy, chews everything. He chews your $600 suit to shreds and chews the sofa pillow cushions and just makes a mess, poops on the carpet all over, just makes a mess. And so you tell your child, I want you to take responsibility for what that dog did. You had authority over it. You made all the decisions. Now you take responsibility for it. And where I'm going with this is, what does responsibility look like in practice? So your son or daughter, whoever they are, they decide to take responsibility for it. And this is what that looks like. They come to you later and says, Dad, Mom, I took responsibility and I'm currently torturing the dog. The dog did bad. I told the dog no when he started chewing on a pillow cushion, and I thought that I'd given clear instructions, and now I'm torturing the dog. I'm taking responsibility for what my dog did. How's that sit with you?
Not too real good.
Okay. Why?
Especially if that torture goes on endlessly.
But that's taking responsibility. See, that's you had the authority. Now you're taking responsibility for the wrongdoing. So why does the moral law written on our heart so terribly disagree with our theology? That we believe God taking the corresponding responsibility for his authority is to torture us in hell because God, I quote, God can't stand sin. He can't stand to look at sin. And now he's just going to torture that thing because of that wrongdoing. Why the discrepancy between our set of principles, our morality, and what we believe the morality that God has? So does God have a split personality? Does he say, do as I say and not as I do? In other words, if the governmental authorities on the earth would do exactly what we believe our God does in terms of how we handle bad behavior, they would be put in prison for life. See, we have a problem here.
We do, but it's everybody knows John 3:16, right? For God so loved the world, blah blah blah. Seldom do they quote John 3:17, which says, "Neither do I condemn you. I didn't come to condemn you. I came to save you." That's the divine nature of God in my mind. Christians tend to be Could I say a little heavy? Would you agree with they're a little heavy on condemnation? If you don't agree with what's in their circle of understanding?
Yeah, they lean that direction. The point I'm making here is that in our mind's eye, we do not believe that taking responsibility looks like extreme punishment. That's not what responsibility looks like. So what does it look like? Let's ask, what does taking responsibility look like? Now, let's don't talk about the God thing, because we believe that God takes responsibility by eternally torturing sinners. Let's talk about what it looks like with the child and the dog. It means that the dog then needs more training, right? Correction. Correction is the key word.
That's right.
And it also means reparations, to repair the harm done in the house. Two things, right. Correction and reparation, not torture, not eternal punishment.
But is that fair to give that child that much responsibility? That child doesn't have a developed decision maker yet.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how old the child was. We didn't specify because we're just doing a thought experiment. But yeah, potentially, if that's a 7-year-old child, then that would not be fair. That's true.
No, that's an imbalance.
But the point I want to harp on is that that we know in our hearts that taking responsibility looks different than what we think it does when God is associated with it. That's the contradiction I'm wanting to lift out.
Right. So in the balance, answering this question now, in the balance of authority and responsibility, what you're saying is it's not responsible of God to eternally punish someone because they had a bad decision maker.
That's right. Just to put it as clear as I can, to me, taking responsibility looks like if there's somebody under you, they need correction, training, etc., etc. And if they've done harm on your watch, you were the authority, so they were operated on your watch, then there needs to be reparations made. The harm needs to be restored.
But also, it goes up the chain, doesn't it? If I have workers that are working on a lot somewhere and they do damage, the responsibility comes back to me because they're taking their direction from me.
You'll be astonished to actually discover that I have a little whiteboard with that diagram on it, Stuart, which I'm going to show you.
Oh, praise the Lord.
Well, you broke the ice on doing it this way. So no, this is really a good point that you brought up. Is we have the idea generally that an authority, let me show this here.
There you go. Yeah.
Can you read it?
Yeah, well, your mic's in the way, but I can, there you go.
Okay.
Chain of command, top, middle, and peon.
So we have the idea, Stuart, that if the top authority delegates authority downward, which it can do, it can delegate authority down, like the parent can tell the child, or the state, a higher authority can tell the parent, which can then tell the child, delegate authority downward, that you can delegate down unconditional free will. For example, the parent can say, I told the child what to do, the child has free will, and now I'm not responsible. But the point I want to make is that's not how authority works in the world. Authority works, you can delegate authority down, but this here can never step out of the line of that authority. In other words, you can never do this. You can never step out and just have the authority stop. The heads roll all the way back up to the Pentagon. That's the point I'm trying to make.
Right.
So whatever the child, whoever delegated authority down, that if there's harm done, if there's mistakes made, those consequences go right back up to the delegating authority.
Right.
That's natural law.
Yeah.
Which means that whatever we do goes right back up to the Creator.
Right.
The Creator cannot just give us unconditional free will and say, okay, I told you what to do. Now I can wash my hands of it like Pilate. It's nothing to me now. And I'm sorry, you did wrong, so you're going to burn in hell. The delegating authority has to take full responsibility for what was delegated down and what happened on his watch. Does that make sense?
It does. And I don't think this is for this video, but I have ask a lot of different people, do you think hell is exactly like we've been taught? Most people say no. Most thinking people. I think we can discuss that concept in a different video, though.
Because I don't want to get into the theology of it.
No.
My emphasis
No.
is on natural justice, which anybody, atheist, Hindu, New Ager, Christian, you name it, will have to acknowledge the truth of natural law. So that's where I'm coming from. And the theological evidence against this is, well, like you say, that's probably another video. And that's not really my thing. I'm interested in it, but that's really not what I want to teach.
Okay, so do you think we've adequately answered this question?
I don't know. From the viewpoint of the listener, I don't know.
It says, can you clarify how eternal torment specifically violates the equilibrium? In other words, what authority is exercised in eternal punishment that lacks a corresponding? And I think you've answered that one.
I think the big idea here, Stuart, is that taking responsibility looks differently than what we thought. That taking responsibility is not torturing, punishing, severely punishing the person that you delegated authority down to and then they messed up, but rather it's then saying, okay, I delegated authority down. It was not successful. I need to look at my training program. I need to take full responsibility for what happened to me, for what happened here on my watch. So I probably have to change my training program. I need to make sure that the person I delegated authority down to was capable of receiving the instructions and doing it. In fact, I'll make an example of that. I know in the past, we used to have missile launch facilities in Germany.
Yeah.
And they were manned by Army personnel. Now think about what happens if a private, and I'm not sure what the access codes were to actually have access to the missiles and launch it, but let's suppose a low-ranking Army personnel was able to accidentally launch a nuclear missile stationed in Germany. And it went to some city and destroyed it. Do you think it would only be those privates or those low-ranking Army personnel that would be in Congress answering questions? No, those heads would roll all the way to the Pentagon.
Well, they should anyway.
Exactly. The general that was the head of that military base would be answering some very hard questions. You can't step out of the line of authority. It goes right back up the line.
If you'll allow me to, let me give you my perspective of why God can have authority over us, because he has taken responsibility.
Okay.
And that is in the concept that he already sent Jesus so that we can, so that's taken responsibility for us. Now, what I find interesting in Romans 5:18 is said, for by the sin of one man, Adam, all men are condemned, but by Christ, all men are saved. Why do people want to emphasize the first half of the verse? We don't know how that's going to happen, but we all want to believe that the first half of the verse is true. We ignore the second half of the verse. Not me, because I believe in both halves. Mm-hmm. So I say God did take responsibility. That could be out here somewhere in stuff that we don't know.
Because we worship our zip code law. We worship how we were raised. That is so sacred. And we... Well,
it's familiar. It's familiar, Scott. And we have a need as humans for connection and acceptance. We don't want to question that and then get kicked out of the tribe.
Oh, so true. And I have one more question. Actually, not a question. It's an example. Let's say we're driving down the road, and let's say we're in Kansas, for example, and we see a sign alongside the highway, and it says, Kansas Department of Torture. How does that sit with us? Would we notice it?
Absolutely.
We would notice it. But what we actually see is Kansas Department of Corrections. Corrections.
Right.
Even the state, as fantastically corrupt as the state is, knows better than our theologians. Even the state knows that it's not cool to have a Kansas Department of Torture, but rather, even the state, as corrupted as, knows that the intent of the purpose of punishment should be to correct and to restore and not to torture. Even the state knows better than our theologians. What do you think?
Kenya's actually pretty good at that. They try to spend a lot of time reconciling prisoners back into society. I really appreciate that.
Oh,
I've been
yeah.
involved in prison. Yeah.
So, do you think that we've answered the question, or at least taken a stab at it?
Well, we've taken a stab, and we're always open to more questions if they're honest questions. So that's something that I want to really emphasize here. Bring your questions and bring your comments, and we're going to spend as much time on this as we need to, because this is important stuff.
Yeah, and I don't think there's any question too dangerous to ask. And there was actually there's an idea floating around out there, and I really like it and believe it. Identify a question that you're afraid to ask. Like, I'll ask any question, but I won't ask that. For example, is God really good? Is God righteous, or is God a very powerful tyrant? That's a dangerous question to some people. Whatever question is too dangerous for you to ask, that's the one to ask right there. Go to the question that you dare not ask and ask that question.
Go to the person that you can't question, and you know where you found your tyrant.
Exactly.
If you can't question authority, why? Because of torment? Maybe not eternal torment. My purpose, I think I found my purpose, to help people find freedom from oppression, spiritually, physically, emotionally, and financially. And this is part of the process.
So natural law simply does not allow eternal torment. That is such a low level of thinking. And it reminds you.
It's an incongruency.
It is.
It's an incongruency in the mind of God.
It's a terrible accusation against God's character. It's actually slander against God's character. And it reminds me of a quote by the rock. He was an incredibly brilliant frontman for a rock band called Jethro Tull from Britain. And on the front of his album cover, the name of the album was Aqualung. He said, in the beginning, I might have to paraphrase this, but this is the gist. In the beginning, man made God in his own image and saw that it was good. And there is so much painful truth in that, is that we don't know that much about God. God is such a mystery. So we fill in the gaps with our own faults, we fill in the gaps with our fear, with our vengeance, with our envy, with our reprisals. And we actually create a God in our own image that is very cruel and very unjust. And then we say, we dare not question that we will quote, well, who am I to question the creator of the heavens? Well, that's a good point. Yeah, we're nobody to question that. But what we need to do is question our zip code law that probably gave us a very poor interpretation of who that creative source is.
Right. Okay, I think we're ready for the next question, but let's do another video on that.
Okay, thank you. Talk to you later, Stuart.
Thank you. Yep.